The day began like any other ordinary morning. The coffee machine hummed softly, the sunlight slipped through the curtains, and everything felt still and safe for a brief moment before the world tilted on its axis. It started with a small inconvenience. A payment declined at the grocery store. Confusion, then irritation, then a creeping sense of dread. A quick check on the banking app was supposed to fix it, but instead it shattered everything. The screen showed a balance that didn't make sense. Zeros where numbers used to be. The savings that took years of sacrifice. The money meant for a home, for dreams, for security gone. Just gone. At first, it was easier to believe it was some glitch. A temporary system error. Maybe the bank was updating something it had to be. But when the transactions loaded, the truth stared back like a cruel joke. Every withdrawal was real, deliberate, and all made by the same familiar hand. His hand, scrolling through the list, felt like reliving every moment of trust that had built this life together. Each withdrawal was another piece of that trust being pulled away. The final transaction stood out. One large sum transferred to an account never seen before. That was the moment the air seemed to vanish. The heart beat faster, but slower at the same time. The world around turned quiet. There was no call, no text, no explanation waiting. Just emptiness. A silence so loud it felt like a scream. There was no warning, no fight, no reason that could justify disappearing like that. Everything shared, dreams, laughter, promises, suddenly felt like lies disguised as love. Days blurred into one another. Hope battled with denial. Maybe there was an emergency. Maybe he'd explain everything once he came back. But deep down, a whisper grew louder. He wasn't coming back. The moment he took that money, he took something else too. Not just trust, not just stability, but the very foundation of what life used to be. Friends tried to help, but their words barely reached the heart. They said maybe it was stress, maybe he just needed space, maybe it wasn't what it looked like. But sometimes the truth doesn't hide behind maybes. Sometimes it stands right in front of you, sharp and merciless. Then came the realization that he hadn't just taken money, he'd taken the future. Every plan built together, every quiet assurance that tomorrow was safe, now belonged to someone else. The man once seen as home had turned into a stranger, one capable of walking away without a trace. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself, but the understanding that it had been planned. While she was busy building a life, he was quietly dismantling it, one secret at a time. And as the realities settled, one question echoed louder than all the rest. How do you rebuild a life that someone else erased overnight? The days that followed were heavy with uncertainty, filled with questions that no one could answer. Every phone call felt like it might bring news. Every knock at the door stirred hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd walk back in and explain everything. Friends tried to calm the storm, assuring that sometimes people break under pressure, that perhaps he only needed time to think, to breathe, to figure himself out. Their words were meant to comfort, but instead they cut deeper because time had already passed, too much time, and no man who loved truly would vanish this long without a trace. Still, denial clung on like a shadow, whispering that love doesn't just end in silence, that maybe there was an explanation waiting, one that could somehow make sense of all the chaos. But as days turned into weeks, the world kept moving forward while everything inside stood still. Calls went unanswered. Messages remained unread. The once familiar ring of his number became a ghost that refused to appear. Desperation eventually gave way to action. Searching through contacts, reaching out to people from work, even calling places he might have gone. Each conversation was a new cut. His office had no answers, only confusion. They said he'd resigned unexpectedly, without notice, leaving behind a vague note that said he was pursuing personal matters. It didn't sound like him, but then again, maybe no one ever truly knows the people they love. And then came the detail that shattered any remaining illusion. His secretary was gone too. The same woman who had always seemed so polite, so professional, now missing without explanation. Her desk was cleared out, her phone disconnected, her apartment empty. That single fact changed everything. It turned the story from heartbreak into betrayal, from confusion into clarity. Suddenly, the puzzle pieces began to fit. But the picture they formed was something no one ever wants to see. Every late night at the office, every sudden meeting, every distracted look that had once been brushed aside now made perfect, devastating sense. The truth had been living quietly beneath the surface, waiting to be found. What hurt most wasn't just the affair or the money. It was the realization that all the signs had been there all along, but love had chosen blindness. The memories once cherished now felt like traps, moments crafted to keep suspicion away. And while the world saw a woman abandoned, what they couldn't see was the deeper wound, the betrayal of trust so complete that it felt like a theft of identity. Standing in the ruins of what was once a shared life, the only thing left was silence. No letter, no apology, no closure. Just absence, wide, cold, and endless. It was in that emptiness that the truth finally settled in. He hadn't disappeared by accident. He had run away, taking not only money, but the version of himself that once promised forever. In the beginning, there was still a desperate effort to pretend everything was normal. The house felt too quiet, too empty, yet there was comfort in routine, making coffee for two, checking the phone for messages that never came, keeping the lights on just in case he walked back through the door. Pretending became a form of survival. Each morning began with a fragile hope, and each night ended with the same crushing silence. The world outside kept spinning. People kept smiling, but inside there was only stillness and disbelief. It was easier to act as if he was simply away for work than to face the truth that he had chosen someone else, somewhere else, over the life once built together. Time moved differently in that emptiness. Days stretched into weeks, and memories became both comfort and torture. Every corner of the house carried a piece of him, the faint scent on a pillow, the jacket still hanging by the door, the mug he used every morning. Each object felt like proof that he existed, that the love once shared was real, even if he no longer was. Holding on to those small things became a way to stay connected, even as they slowly became reminders of loss instead of love. Pretending wasn't about denial anymore. It was about breathing through pain that words couldn't hold. But as the quiet days continued, something began to shift. The body was going through the motions, but the mind couldn't stop replaying every detail. The nights he came home late, the lies disguised as excuses, the way his eyes used to avoid meeting hers toward the end. The truth started to piece itself together, and it was unbearable. Still, instead of anger, there was exhaustion. Grief has a way of draining everything, even rage. The heart wanted answers, but deep down, the answers were already known. He hadn't left because of some sudden mistake. He'd left because he had been planning it for a long time. While the world outside moved on, there was no moving on inside. Friends called, offered advice, tried to pull her back into life. But every conversation felt like watching someone else's world. Happiness seemed like something that belonged to other people. Nights were the worst. The stillness, the questions, the memories that played like an endless movie with no ending. There were moments of strength, pretending to be okay, smiling for others. But the heart still broke quietly behind closed doors. Over time, the pain began to take a different shape. It stopped feeling like confusion and started feeling like acceptance. Not forgiveness, but a numb recognition that some stories don't end with closure. They end with silence. The hardest truth to face wasn't that he left. It was realizing he had emotionally left long before he physically did. And that understanding hurt more than the loss itself, because it meant the love once believed to be real had already been gone long before the goodbye ever came. It happened on a night that felt no different from any other. The television played softly in the background, a half-empty cup sat on the table, and the air was still. The phone lay face down, untouched for hours, until it suddenly lit up with a name that hadn't appeared on the screen in months. For a moment, time froze. The heart raced so fast it was hard to breathe. The name looked unreal, like a cruel trick from fate, yet it was there. Calling, glowing, demanding to be answered. After all the nights of begging for this exact moment, it had finally come. Hands trembled reaching for the phone. Every emotion, anger, love, confusion, longing collided all at once. For a second, there was hesitation. What do you say to someone who shattered your world? Do you ask why? Do you scream? Do you pretend you're okay? None of it mattered because curiosity was stronger than fear. The call connected and silence filled the air, thick and heavy. Then a voice came through, but it wasn't his. It was calm, steady, official. The kind of voice that doesn't belong in love stories, only in endings. It introduced itself not as the man once loved, but as a police officer. The words felt distant at first, hard to process, like listening through water. The officer spoke slowly, explaining that they had recovered a damaged phone from the scene of an accident earlier that night. The device was registered to his name, and this was the first number listed in the contacts. For a moment, the mind refused to understand. The room started spinning, the sound faded, and only fragments of words broke through. Wrecked car, 2 passengers, no identification, investigation ongoing. The voice on the other end was steady, but the world around wasn't. Everything blurred into static. When the call ended, there was no strength left to cry. The phone slipped from shaking hands, landing on the floor with a dull thud that echoed louder than the news itself. The silence that followed was unbearable, not because of grief yet, but because of the haunting uncertainty. The call didn't confirm anything, not life, not death, just the existence of a wreck and a name attached to it. The mind, tried to piece it together, tried to believe there was a mistake, that someone else's phone had been found, that somehow this wasn't real. But deep down, instinct whispered that it was. The same gut feeling that once knew he was gone now knew he was never coming back in the same way again. The anger, the betrayal, the pain, all of it tangled with a strange numbness. Because no matter how much someone hurt you, a part of your heart still breaks when you realize their story might have ended before you ever got the answers you deserved. The world seemed to move in slow motion as the officer's words sank in. Every sound in the room faded, replaced by a ringing that echoed somewhere deep inside. The body felt frozen, like time had stopped, but the heart hadn't gotten the message. After what felt like hours, another call came. The confirmation. There had been an accident on the highway late at night. A car had veered off the road, hit the divider, and flipped multiple times before bursting into flames. 2 people were inside. One survived. The other didn't, and the name attached to the wrecked car was his. There was no space for thought, no strength left for anger. Just an overwhelming wave of disbelief that made breathing feel like a chore. The mind tried to grasp what this meant. That the same person who vanished with lies and betrayal was now part of a tragedy that couldn't be undone. It wasn't supposed to end like this. There was supposed to be confrontation, answers, maybe even forgiveness one day. But instead, there was only a crash report and a voice from the police confirming what the heart already knew. The officer explained that one of the passengers had been pulled out alive before the car caught fire. The survivor was badly injured, unconscious, and identified later as the woman who had disappeared with him. Hearing that name again brought a strange, bitter ache. Part sorrow, part fury, part exhaustion. There was something cruel about knowing she had survived when the one who caused all this pain did not. It was the kind of twist life delivers without warning, without logic. The kind that leaves you questioning everything you ever believed about fate and justice. When the call ended, there was no dramatic outburst, no storm of tears, just stillness, the kind that comes when grief and shock mix together until you can't tell them apart. The air felt heavy, pressing down with the weight of everything unsaid. The finality of it all didn't bring relief, only confusion. How could someone cause so much destruction and then vanish in an instant, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and broken lives? The next morning, the house felt different, the same walls, the same silence, but now it carried the echo of an ending that wasn't chosen. Standing by the window, watching the sun rise, the mind replayed every memory once more. The laughter, the fights, the last time he walked out the door. There was an ache that words couldn't describe, a kind of pain that sits quietly and refuses to fade. In that stillness, something shifted. It wasn't forgiveness, and it wasn't closure. It was realization that no truth, no confession, no apology would ever come now. Whatever answers existed were gone with him. And as the sun rose higher, one thought lingered painfully clear. Sometimes life doesn't wait for us to heal before it ends a story. The call from the police didn't just end a chapter. It rewrote the entire story. For days afterward, everything felt unreal, like living in a dream that wouldn't end. The anger that once burned so fiercely slowly began to fade, replaced by a hollow kind of quiet. The truth had come, but it wasn't the kind that offered peace. It was a truth that left nothing behind. No chance to ask why, no way to demand answers, no opportunity to understand the choices that had led to such destruction. The heart wanted to hate, to cling to the betrayal, but grief has a way of softening even the hardest edges. It wasn't forgiveness, but a strange acceptance that some questions will never be answered. There was a moment, standing in that silence, when it became clear that pain doesn't vanish when a story ends, it only changes shape. The memories of lies and betrayal still lingered, but they no longer had the same power. Instead of fury, there was exhaustion, the kind that comes after carrying too much for too long. The realization settled slowly. Secrets have the power to destroy more than relationships. They destroy people, piece by piece, from the inside out. They poison everything, trust, love, hope, until there's nothing left to recognize. And that's exactly what had happened here. In the end, it wasn't just love that died. It was the person who once believed love could survive anything. What remained was someone different, quieter, colder, but stronger in ways that pain can only teach. The past couldn't be rewritten, but it could be faced. The tears that once came with anger now fell with a kind of weary understanding. Life had taken something away, but it had also given something back. A truth about survival. Sometimes the greatest strength isn't in holding on, but in letting go of the version of life that no longer exists. The world didn't stop. Bills still arrived. Morning still came, and the quiet ache eventually became part of the background. But there was a moment, small and almost unnoticed, when breathing no longer felt heavy. The wound was still there, but it stopped defining everything. That's when the final truth emerged. Closure isn't always a moment or a conversation. It's a choice. It's the decision to stop chasing explanations that will never come and to start rebuilding from what's left. There was no final message, no apology, no words to make sense of it all. Just silence, the kind that once felt unbearable but now carried a strange comfort. Because in that silence, there was finally freedom. Not from the pain, but from the hold it once had. Some endings don't come with answers, they come with understanding. And sometimes, that's enough to begin again, even after everything has fallen apart. In the end, this story wasn't about loss alone. It was about rediscovery. When everything was taken, when love turned into betrayal and trust into ashes, what remained was a heart that refused to stop beating. Pain became a teacher, silence became strength, and loneliness became a mirror reflecting the truth of resilience. Sometimes life destroys everything we thought we needed just to show us who we are without it. It teaches that closure doesn't always come from others. It comes from within, from standing back up after being broken, from breathing again, even when the air still hurts. There's no perfect ending to a story like this, no neat resolution, no poetic justice, only the raw truth of survival. Love can vanish, people can lie, and promises can fade, but the soul that endures through it all becomes unshakable. What once felt like the end turns out to be the beginning of a different kind of strength, one born from heartbreak and clarity. This story is a reminder that even the deepest wounds can heal, though they leave marks that never fully fade. Those marks aren't signs of weakness. They're proof of survival. Every scar tells a story of someone who refused to be destroyed by the darkness that tried to consume them. The betrayal, the pain, the unanswered questions, they don't define the ending. They define the transformation. So when everything falls apart and there's no one left to blame, there comes a quiet understanding that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about learning to live again with eyes wide open. Trusting not in promises, but in your own strength. Sometimes losing everything isn't the worst thing that can happen. Sometimes it's the only way to find yourself again.